So the infamous Crysis, it could inspire fear into many PCs, and it's been given the remastered treatment across all platforms including Nintendo Switch. A surprise in itself, but the questions remain about how this updated Crysis actually runs across the various systems, and really whether we even need a Crysis Remastered. After having played the game on both the Xbox One X and the Switch, I would say if you're looking to buy this on Microsoft's more powerful system, I haven't been that impressed with what I've played at all. I started playing this on release day, and this review is about my experience with it then and over the subsequent days after a patch was released as well. I also played it on the Switch back in July when it released, and which was the only version to come out at the time when the other versions got a delay. Now, delays usually lead to improvements, but playing on the Xbox One X, this needed more time in order to deliver a product which was worth buying even at its budget price point. We'll start with the Nintendo Switch, and the two words of Switch and Crysis, I would never have expected to have seen them together, as getting this onto the handheld with the specs that it has would require some sort of black magic for it to run at a frame rate and with a visual quality people would be happy with having, especially with a game which has always been held up as being so impressive from a visual standpoint. And even though it is in no way perfect, I couldn't help but be impressed with what I was seeing as I played in handheld mode. The Nintendo Switch does a pretty damn good job of taking the open environments in Crysis and doing them justice. The environments themselves have been brought over intact, and the large amount of foliage and vegetation within the forest-like areas is also there on full display for the most part. The sun-soaked beaches are also there, and the lighting associated with these outdoor places is also impressive, even if the shadows and reflections have been scaled back when compared to Microsoft's system. The water effects look quite good as well, even if once again it has been scaled down from the more powerful consoles and of course the PC. The physics system is intact, whereby you can destroy small huts and buildings with your firepower, which will see the structure collapse based upon where it was hit, but it can often come across like the whole thing was made out of cardboard and just waiting to fall over. Shooting at the trunks of trees will see them give way and topple over, which is once again impressive to be seen running on such a small screen. There were numerous times where I had to keep reminding myself that I was indeed playing this on a handheld, which felt a little insane at times, even if I was seeing drawing and pop-up more than I would have liked. But keep in mind that seeing Crysis run on the Switch in handheld mode makes it look more impressive because of the small size of the screen. As we turn our attention to Microsoft's Xbox One X, we can immediately see the increased graphical fidelity. But playing Crysis on the Xbox One X upon release was nothing short of a chore. Graphically it's quite beautiful until you begin to move, and then the problems jump out of the screen and punch you in the face. I had to force myself to play the game at times due to the absolutely horrid performance. From poor frame rates and frame pacing to certain parts of the screen flickering at times, this wasn't a regular occurrence, thankfully, but it was there, not to mention the screen tearing. The One X version comes with 3 options in terms of visuals, with those being quality, performance, and astoundingly, a ray tracing mode included, which may be worth checking out for many console gamers to see how current gen hardware copes with this feature. And I do recommend checking out this feature, as I'll explain soon. Starting with the quality mode, this of course will give you the best visual clarity when compared to the others, running at a dynamic resolution, which is to be expected in such a demanding game. We then have the performance mode, which drops the image down to 1080p and bumps up the frame rate, but don't be expecting a constant 60 frames a second, or don't even expect it even some of the time in my experience. Unless I was in an enclosed indoor environment, I was never getting that smoothness in the open outdoor areas that you would expect from a game running at 60 frames a second. The last option is the ray tracing mode, which takes a high-end feature often associated with much more powerful hardware and implements it into the higher end consoles. Once again, the resolution is dynamic, but this time much lower than when running in quality mode. Players can switch between quality and performance modes on the fly, but if you want to switch to the ray tracing mode, then you'll need to back out to the main menu for it to take effect. It was quite a number of hours into playing Crysis where I thought I would check out this ray tracing mode, and to my surprise, I tended to stick with this setting for most of my playtime as it just ran at a more consistent frame rate, which made playing the game an overall better experience, even if I did notice some slight pauses every now and again, which only seemed to happen in this mode. Not a good thing by any means, but the more stable frame rate most of the time made it my pick. The quality mode, even with its higher resolution, which gave textures and shadows, especially at a distance, some extra clarity, it wasn't worth needing to put up with a dipping frame rate and stutters which were constantly on display. It really affected gameplay, as even trying to aim would see me overshoot or undershoot enemies, and often I'd simply slow down my movements as I was getting shot just to wrestle some control back from the game. The performance mode isn't much better, if at all, as the same problems persisted, only now I was starting off at a higher frame rate, but the dips were huge sometimes. Even early in the game, it wasn't uncommon for the frame rate to absolutely tank when the action heated up. I found the visual detail to hold up quite nicely when compared to the quality mode, but I really wouldn't recommend playing on either. Even with the patch installed, performance wasn't cleaned up anywhere near enough, and at times it could feel the same if not worse. The amount of screen tearing on display in these two modes is so disappointing as well, just another performance problem that the delay did not fix. Simply put, if you're going to play Crysis on the Xbox One X, stick with the ray tracing mode if you are fond of some consistent performance and frame rates. Moving on to the sound, we have the standard explosions and weapons fire from the different types of guns. I would say that I thought when firing the heavier weapons such as the missile launcher, it lacked a bit of bass, where I was after that classic deep boom sound you would expect. Playing mostly while listening with my Astro A50s, it just lacked a bit of punch, as opposed to the weapons which all sounded pretty good, even if the submachine gun kind of sounded like a toy, to be honest, like a fast firing Nerf gun. Being outdoors so much, there wasn't a lot in the way of environmental sounds, which was a little disappointing as well. I would have liked to hear more wildlife, and a change in the environments themselves would have added to this greatly with rain, storms or windy conditions. Of course, when listening with headphones, the game is going to sound much better than if you're listening with the speakers of the Switch as well. When it comes to the voice acting, there isn't anything here that will impress you, and the age of the original game really starts to show in this department. Dialogue is average when it's delivered like this, where everyone seems to talk with a sense of urgency, and I say seems to, as any sort of emotional depth, anger or frustration just doesn't get conveyed to the player at all. It's because of this that the story never really pulled me into a level I wanted it to. The story itself sees Raptor Team, which you're a part of, being dispatched to a certain island after a distress call is made from it. After only a short time, you discover that there are other creatures on the island, and which have unfortunately killed members of your team. Like I said, I didn't really get caught up in the story as it fell a bit flat. But what I did enjoy was the music, especially the more lively orchestral pieces during action sequences, or how the music moves between some more upbeat tempo tracks that fit in with the jungle setting, but then switches between more menacing and sci-fi-esque pieces. And it's this blend that always had my ears pricked up and wanting to listen to the varied soundtrack. And then we get to the gameplay and what Crysis is actually like to play. Now, the poor performance in some modes on the Xbox and less than 30 frames per second on the Switch definitely doesn't let the game shine as I'd like it to, but as I mentioned, considering this is running on a handheld, it's pretty impressive. Playing on the Switch for a little while did tend to make my hands cramp at times, simply because you're using all the buttons so often. Not so much a problem with the game, as it's more of a problem with playing fast, action-oriented games on the Switch for myself over a long period of time. It's a much better experience in terms of controls on the Xbox side of things, where I use the Elite controller, which is always comfortable for long play sessions. As a part of Crysis, we of course have the Nano Suit, which gives us a couple of abilities such as invisibility and a shield, which will drain power over time, so these can only be used for short periods whereby the suit needs to recharge. Hitting the right bumper will turn you invisible, whilst the left will bring up the shield. But the suit also lets you jump higher than normal. Not a large amount, but it is useful when wanting to go over barriers, fences, or making your way up a cliff. The suit will also help you survive larger drops too, and these drain the power, and a recharge is necessary. Even though the game is semi-open world, you'll be moving from objective to objective, whether that be on foot, driving around in a jeep or a tank, or in small boats you'll find in the water. Moving around on foot, I felt like my character never moved fast enough, where it felt like I was always walking at times. Sprinting is quite fast and will see you moving much faster around the environments, but of course this drains suit power, so you're either moving what I perceive to be incredibly slow or fast with no happy medium. In terms of AI enemies, they will definitely present a challenge on the higher difficulties, but even when set lower, you can still die if you are fighting multiple enemies at once and not hitting your targets. But again, I found some of the difficulty to be artificial as I was fighting against the game and its performance. But in saying that, Crysis can feel a bit dated in regards to its gunplay when compared to other games out there such as Call of Duty or Destiny. But even back in 2007, I felt it wasn't at the level of, say, the Halo series. Now, one area which frustrated me numerous times was the ability for how easily enemies would spot me from a distance when I was so far away, and there was actually a couple of times where the bullets were flying through the rock I was hidden behind. Bullets would be flying towards me, sometimes with such accuracy from so far away, it made me question how they could hit me so easily with such a powerful automatic weapon from that distance. Even when there were trees and bushes in the way, they had surprisingly good accuracy considering I couldn't see them at all. But even if Crysis hit all the right notes with this remaster, was it really needed at all? Was enough change for it to be worthy of a purchase? I would say yes on Switch if you're looking for a first-person shooter on Nintendo's handheld, which there aren't too many of. It looks very good even if it does have some performance and control issues, even more so for its more budget price. The problem lies on the Xbox side of things. The console versions of the remaster have been based upon the PS3 and 360 Crysis, as opposed to the original PC release. So the games have less vegetation and the detail surrounding the objects in the world has been reduced. This is another disappointment, but again, I feel the Switch is punching above its weight and the small screen size is a positive. But on Xbox, all we have is the performance-plagued Xbox 360 version having some nice bells and whistles added to it to give us an Xbox One X performance-plagued remaster. It would take some pretty impressive patches from Saber Interactive and Crytek to bring this version up to a level that's needed. I would rather tone the resolution down to 1080p and have a locked 30 frames a second than play the dropped frames stuttering mess of quality mode or the higher frame rate which has huge drops plus stuttering in performance mode. If it wasn't for the ray tracing mode, then I would have given up on the Xbox remastered version and just stuck with the Switch. Hopefully with the more powerful consoles releasing soon, console gamers can finally get a great looking Crysis with the 60 frames a second, which I feel the title will benefit from immensely. When it comes to the statement, can it run Crysis? The answer is yes, but what are you willing to sacrifice in order to play it?